Alright, in this video, I'm going to talk about rendering y'all's emissive objects in Renderman. I'm going to show you guys a setup that is a little, like, hacky, sloppy, messy, but it'll get the job done. Each person, depending on how they're approaching their glowing objects or emissive objects, might have a slightly different approach. So this hopefully will just give you guys some options or ideas of how to approach this set of Renderman to make it look a little bit better. So here's kind of like a portal test I have going. I set this up with texture maps that Jen and Marinko had shared with me. So I have two different setups, and I'm going to show them in the Hypershade. I have a Pixar surface, and then I have another one that is using a llama surface, which is something we haven't talked about in the class. It's just a different shader. And we'll go over that second, but let's go ahead and talk about this one first. So what I'm doing here is I'm essentially just plugging in my emissive map into my glow color, right? Everything else, in this case, I want this to feel like a pure energy field, right? Like I don't want this to feel like an object necessarily that's glowing. I want it to feel like it's like just like pure energy, right? So I turned off my diffuse, I turned off my specular, I'm not using anything like glass, and I'm just plugging this straight into glow. The downside, of course, is if I turn glow off, you can see this is blocking light, right? Like nothing can be seen behind it, and what's actually behind it is like a statue. So you can see there's a little statue back here. So you could plug something also into presence, right? Like you can plug it into the presence right here to like hide the object wherever you don't have the glow, or you could try using glass. It's just up to you how you want to do that. Okay, so but I'm just, for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to ahead and use a glow. So I just brought the gain up and I plugged my texture map into the glow. So if you look at my texture map, you'll see that by default it's pretty desaturated, and it's pretty I guess what would you say, kind of dim, right? So if I'm going to go ahead and just snapshot this. I'm going to right click and say command snapshot no AOVs. You'll see I'm just going to save a version of that because I'm just going to go ahead and plug this straight into my text into the Pixar surface. So you can see it does feel like it's glowing, but it just doesn't have that punch, right? Like it doesn't feel super bright, right? You see it casts a little bit of light, but you can see this one, it's like feels like it's like lights emanating off of this. So it depends on what you want, right? If you have like little LEDs, you're not going to want to crank this super high and make it like blowing out light. The glow color, it's turning the surface into essentially like a light source. And so the default values, right, 0 to 1, sometimes doesn't give you what you want, right? Like the pixel values are only going to go from 0 to 1, right? Inside of Renderman, or they're viewed as 0 to 1. They're being remapped from 0 to 255. So they're going from 0 to 1, and so I want to push that a little bit further. So that's what I'm doing here with this remap node, but we're just going to go ahead and remake it. So we'll do remap. So I'm just going to plug that in here. And so by default, this is like the levels node inside of Substance Painter or Photoshop, right? It's just taking your input values, like the values of your texture map, and then it's remapping them to a different value range, or you kind of shift the values, the mid values darker or lighter, and just lets you change your contrast, your overall lightness and darkness. So if it's like using a levels node or using that contrast and balance node inside of Substance Painter. So by default, I can't go past 0 to 1, right? It's just trying to remap it from 0 to 1 to another 0 to 1, right? So this right here is my output and min and max. Even if I push this past like 2, right? Like it might change. Let's take a look at this. It might change like the distribution of my values, but nothing's going over 1. And if I hover over this, I have this pixel readout turned on down here, and you can see that that's not going above 1, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and turn off clamp output. And so what you'll start to see is that you can see now the values are going above 1. Let's go ahead and bring this out to something like 4. You can see now I can crank this super high. So of course, I might have to make an adjustment to this. So I'm going to have to go ahead and, I could play with the output min. I could play with the output min to like change that contrast on there. I could go ahead and let's set that to 0. Another thing I could do is I can bring the input min and the input max down, which is just going to increase contrast. I can bring the gain or bias down, or play around with that a little bit. And then what I would do is, you can see whenever you increase contrast with color, you tend to like push the saturation up. So usually you'll want to like a Pixar or HSL node, so you can change the saturation. So you can see I'm going to just do this right here. And so let's go ahead and just collapse that down, and then I can just dial back that saturation a bit so it's not kind of like going away from my original image. So you can see this looks a little bit different, but this is where I'm kind of dialing that back and playing around with this. So yeah, anyways, so this is like a basic kind of idea that you could work with. And so yeah, so that was something that I kind of wanted to play around with. You can tell like maybe it doesn't have the look that we want with our original texture map. If I take a look at this here, right, if I kind of want that look, then I'd have to reconsider this, and I might need to do some rendering or compositing tricks to get that glow to pull off without like really messing up this image. Which actually I could use with this node, which we'll talk about in a second. So, okay, let's go ahead and come over here to the llama surface. So this is a slightly different setup. The llama surface is it's just a different shader. It's in the Material X format. It's used by ILM and I think Lucasfilm and probably a lot of other studios. But anyways, it comes in Renderman. And so Pixar Surface has like all these different shading nodes, right? Or these shading components, right? You got diffuse, primary, specular, you got your subsurface, you got your glass, you got your glow, and they're all packed into one, right? And you're just turning them on and off. Llama Surface comes with none of them by default, right? And you add them on, right? So you can see I'm adding those shading components on, which is cool because it lets us layer up and control all of our shading in a more sophisticated way. It just means it's slightly more complicated if you aren't familiar with it. It's not too bad, and this setup that I have is pretty simple. So what I have is you have your Llama Surface, right, which is your base material. And here's where we plug in our material node chain into the material front. And you can see here's where if you did want to do presence, you can do that. You just have to make sure presence is turned on right here. And I'm turning on opacity. If I'm doing like a glass material, I would maybe do something like compute interior. So over here is my llama add node. So my llama add node is just going to add two shading components on top of each other, like diffuse and specular, like up here. You know how they kind of sit on top of each other and they interact with each other? You're not turning one off to turn the other on, they interact. So that's what llama add is doing. And so we have two material nodes coming in. I have my emissive, which is glow, and I have my dielectric, which is like my specular / transmission. So it's like kind of like a glass shader for the most part. So that dielectric, and it doesn't really matter in this case which order I'm putting them in, except for this map. But anyways, so here I'm just plugging in my my color again into right, I desaturated it so I can and then you can see I was playing with the color a little bit. So put that, and then I think I probably don't need that HSL node. And so I just plug that into llama emission, right? So llama emission is really easy. It just has a color input, and I just take the out color and put it into one of the material inputs. And then I have my dielectric, right? And so I'm going to go ahead and disconnect this. So I have these weight values. Let's go ahead and turn that off so we can see this. I'm going to turn off the, let's see, emissions weight 1. So I'm going to just bring the weight down to 0. This is kind of like a mask value, right? Or opacity value for that layer. So you can see now I'm only seeing my dielectric, right? Because that value is 1, the emissive is 0. So on my dielectric node, here I have like my reflection and transmission. So if I don't want any reflection, I would just turn this to black, the tint to black. And if I didn't want any transmission, like light coming through, I would just turn that to black. So it's just specular reflection and not light coming through. So this is going to be, how bright my reflections are, right? Which is also going to, physically accurately try to like balance out with the light coming through. So I might do like 0.03 for like 3% reflection. And then here's my roughness map, as you'd expect. And then you have things like anisotropy. Dispersion's a really cool effect. I don't know if anybody's going to need it, but it's kind of neat. It's like essentially like separation of the different wavelengths of light as it travels through the material. So you can see it has like this kind of cool chromatic aberration, almost feels like chromatic aberration. But it's kind of like this effect that you'll see in like diamonds and things like that with really high indices of refraction. It'll like not break, but it slows down or bends away different wavelengths of light differently. And then we have things like interior if you're doing volumes, and you can do like your like index of refraction down here as well, and some other things like energy compensation. But we're not going to worry about that. We're not going to have to need that. So here we have, I'm going to turn on my glow. So they're just adding on to each other, and you can kind of see the statue behind it. But I want to kind of control this a little bit because I'm not going to bring up the reference, but in the reference for Loki, this is what Jenna was working with. That's like what the reference she has. It was kind of like it felt like a glass, like the portal's like a piece of glass that has like glowing around the edges. So what I did was I went ahead and made a mask inside of Substance Painter, and I'm just going to plug in one of these channels into that weight right there. And so you can see here I have like my mask input, so we're just going to go ahead and don't worry about this PixRT, I'll talk about that in a second. So we have this kind of like glow mask that I created. I'd use like ambient occlusion, I added a little texture, and then I'm just remapping it based on like what feels good inside the viewport. Just the two setups I kind of did, right, is just I did this like kind of pure energy version, and then I did this version where I kind of wanted to like interact with the surface. I had another version, I think, let me go ahead and just pull it in. I don't know if I have it set up correctly, but we'll see. So you can see here I actually have this like thick material. I replaced the portal with like essentially like a cylinder that extends backwards in space, and then I like kind of took the surface and I kind of displaced it, right, so it can feel a little wavy. And then I, essentially made it feel like, I tried to make it feel like a water material. And then I had like this light source that's going through it, right? So that's what's hitting the character right there. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my render settings. And so inside my image tool, you'll see like a lot of times you guys kind of have it like this. By default, like your inspector is pulled up, which just tells you data about your current frame or render. And then you don't have the catalog. Thank you, catalog. So C, which is catalog. So I'm pressing I to hide the inspector, and I'm pressing C to bring in the catalog. You can also just go to window. Here we go. All right, so here I am in image tool. I have the catalog pulled up, and if I do that little drop down menu, you can see I have the names of my render passes. So the default one is just the beauty. Again, that's all the material, light interactions, everything that emits light or interacts with light is calculated and added in here. So that's what beauty is. Here I have that ID, which we're going to ignore. You can see I've created two different custom render passes. One is my scene with none of the glowing stuff. I have just the glowing light, and then I have just the portal. Right, so I set this up so that I could separate these, and then I have a little bit more control inside of my render setting. So right here, you'll see there's these two right here, and they're currently blank, and that's because I have unhooked them. Oop, let's get rid of that. But let's go ahead and bring these over here, and we'll take a look at those. So you can take different textures in your essentially your texturing workflow, and you can turn it into a render pass. So that's going to essentially make it so in compositing, where we assemble all of our different render passes to make our own custom image, besides just whatever the beauty gives us, that gives us more control and flexibility to address an aspect of our object. So one of those aspects I could do is like a texture, right? So if I had a pattern or a logo or something like that, I could turn that into a render pass with this node here called PixRT. T-E-E, like a t-shirt. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug in I'm going to plug this node in between like essentially some part of my hypershade network, and it doesn't affect the shading, right? It's not going to change the shading, but now whenever I render, it's going to, and I'll probably have to restart my render. Well, also actually I need to fix something really quickly. So what it's going to do is when I render, it's going to output this to a custom AOV. I have to set up that AOV, but it's just essentially labeling this texture image right here, this one right here, and it's going to output it into a map. A render pass. So let's come over and look at this. And so you can see I'm putting into the color, and then I can define the name of that render pass, which is what the AOV is. So let's go ahead and call this one portal color. So I'm just naming it portal color, press enter. And I might go ahead and re-render. And you'll see on my portal color, you see now that image is, it's pulling this out, which is kind of silly because my emissive pass is the exact same thing, so it's kind of a silly way to do that. But what I could do is, let's say instead of putting it there, I put that there, and you can see that now that this is not part of that workflow, now portal color is nothing, right? But let's say if I put it before the HSL node, right? Like let's say I put it over here and before the remap node, right? So I'll just do input RGB, bring that into there, just go here. And you'll see now it looks like my texture map, right? Now let's go back to our beauty pass. It's going to take this texture map and it's going to output it to its own render output. So you can see that right there. So that's what PixRT is used for. I used it for this other setup more so. So on this llama material, I forgot I did the dispersion thing. I have right here my mask, right? So we got our black and white mask here. And I'm actually exporting that out into its own AOV. So on this one, I called it thin mask. And so we have this thin mask render pass, and you can see it's outputting that texture map into its own custom render pass. I didn't show you guys a full setup. Let's go ahead and take a look at the full setup. So if I come out here, you can see this is the render settings. So let's talk about this. So I'm going to open up my render settings. If I come to Renderman and then I go over to AOVs, I have my render passes. Essentially, all of these different passes that are going to be exported out when I render my image. So by default, you will only have beauty with a CI and A. So this is going to be like the name of the image that it creates, and these are going to be the passes that are stored underneath it. So, and I'm not like a compositing genius, so there's probably smarter workflows, but I'm going to show you what works for me. So what I did here was I added a few nodes here. So the default is CI and A. So CI is like all the color information, and A is the alpha. So we want those. Those are going to stick around. And then what we're going to do is I added a couple custom masks here, right? So let's talk about the PixRT masks first. So for the PixRT masks, what I did was over here is all our available channels, and this is what's coming out. And so what I would do is if I wanted to make a custom one, let's go ahead. I'm actually going to get rid of these. So we'll go ahead and subtract them, and I'm going to subtract that one. So you can see I got rid of them. And you usually don't want to mess around with this, in my opinion, while IPR is running, just because it gets kind of like it keeps restarting and resetting, and it gets kind of annoying. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and press this right here to create a custom channel. So I'm going to get that thin mask. So I made that PixRT with the AOV name thin mask. So I'm going to call this one thin mask. The actual name of the channel doesn't matter, but if I call it thin, let's just call it thin. Say okay. On here, it's going to ask you what information is going to be stored in this render pass. In this case, we want to store that map, that black and white map that was created in the hypershade. So let's go here, right? So that black and white mask that was put in the hypershade, we want to store that in the AOV. And so we made that PixRT. We called it the AOV name thin mask. So I'm going to put that name right there into here, thin mask. Okay, press enter. And then I'm going to go ahead and select my beauty pass with that selected and just click this, which is going to add channels to selected display. It's going to say, it doesn't show you a warning, but I'm going to say use existing node. So you'll see it adds it to there. And now you can see that texture map is coming out in that new thin AOV. All right, let's talk about the other shading nodes that are in here. So if you come down here, I'm gonna I collapse the standard, stylized, diagnostic. I don't need any of those for this project. But down here we have our color map, so I can export just the color map with no lighting. That's just gonna be all the color information. We have our beauty map, which is the exact same as this one. We have emissive. So that's actually down here. Actually, I guess it's right there. I thought it was down lower. So emissive is just outputting the emissive object. And then we have our direct diffuse, direct specular. So these are all just different shading interactions. It says lighting, but these are all of our shading interactions it's separated into render passes. So if I came in here and I did, let's say, direct specular, let's come over here. I'll go ahead and take that and we'll add it to our current layer stack, or our current AOV stack, and you see all of my reflections are now stored in just this beauty pass. So I don't really need that for this purpose, but that's something that you could do if you wanted to. And I have, if you're curious about any of this stuff, I have a playlist of compositing and render passes and stuff like that you can watch. But in my case, I just wanted the emissive object, so I just pulled that one in and I've just added that over here by clicking on that button. And then I made two custom ones, because the one problem with this is that the emissive Well, so I could do emissive with, or like my image without the emissive object, right? So I can separate the emissive object. So we went emissive, but there's not really a beauty pass for showing everything else but the emissive, right? You kind of have to make your own custom one. So what I did was I went up here and I went ahead and created 2 new custom ones, right? And so I just named one of them just the glow, one of them with no glow, and you'll see what those are. So just the glow, so that's like the glow that's not the emissive object, but the light coming from the emissive object, and then my render without either the portal or the emissive light. So that just gives me more control again. Like this, I know this is a little complicated for if any of you guys have never done this kind of stuff before, but I'm just going to show you guys that. I created a new one, and I called this one, like, let's just say just glow, and just glow. So I'm not going to explain all this here because there's articles on it. It is not artist friendly, but this is essentially, this right here, LPE, means light path expression. This is essentially how you define what light interactions and shading interactions are stored in the image, right? So all of these down here, if I add, let's go ahead and add this one, direct specular to that one. Direct specular, let's add that one, use existing node. So you'll see when I click on that, you're right, it has its own custom LPE, right? So it has like a different expression. It's like kind of like a formula. Let's get rid of that, I don't want that one. You know, these are all, this all gets really complicated really fast, but I'm just letting you know that I just modified the default light path expression that's used for beauty, or for, I don't know, I have it stored somewhere else, but for the beauty pass, so I guess if I took the beauty pass, I can go ahead and add it to this one, right? So the beauty pass, this is the default, this is the same thing as this one right here. This is the default expression, which is getting all my light and shading information, and I'm just making like modifications to it. So I'm removing things like the O and the little asterisk. So anyways, I said I wasn't going to get into this too deep, and I'm not going to. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of that. So here's what I did on this one. So I essentially took that default beauty pass, and to have not the emissive information, I got rid of the letter O, and then to get just the glow, I got rid of the asterisks and the brackets L. So if you know what you're doing, you can just do that, but I'll copy paste that. So when you can grab the expression that I save, I'll put it in the description of this video. You can copy that and then paste it into channel source. So anyways, so I have, you know, just the glow, no glow, and emissive, and so those are just these are the render passes I have. So now when I go ahead and when I batch render it, what I get from the pipeline is I get, or whatever, is I get EXR files, .exr files, open EXR files, which is great. If I'm exporting it from image tool, right, you're probably more used to saying export file and doing like a PNG. In my case, if I'm going to be testing this and setting this up in Nuke, I just want this image, I'm going to go ahead and do open EXR half right here. So it's going to store it as an EXR file. We'll call this one render portal. Save. Okay, here I am in Nuke. What I'm going to do is, this is what your view should look like. I'm going to press tab in this workspace down here. I'm not going to go over how to use Nuke very much. I have a video on that you guys can watch, and there's plenty of tutorials online. So I'm going to press tab like you would in the Hypershade, and I'm going to go ahead and click on read. I'm going to find my file, say render portal, open, and I'm going to go ahead and take a look at that. So we can see this is my beauty image, right? Inside that image, we have our other render passes. So just really quickly, we rendered an OpenEXR file. So the OpenEXR file is essentially a file format that can store multiple images in it, which is awesome, right? So, you know, when we come in here and we have this render pass, right, or this render setup where we have, you know, all these different render passes stored inside of it, that is being exported in the OpenEXR and packing all those images in, and you can separate them back out. My EXR file brought in, oops, and I have my viewer. I'm just going to pull the input into that one, so this is plugging into there. And so up here I can kind of change which channel I'm looking at. So by default I'm looking at my default beauty channel, the one that's at the root, this one right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I can come in here to beauty just glow, right? So there's my render pass, here's beauty no glow, here's emissive, here's thick portal, in this case it's the same thing as emissive, and then thin, which in this case doesn't have anything in it. So I'm going to go back to RGBA. If your viewport for some reason, like if you unplug and replug and you reload files, it like feels like it's not updating correctly. Something you can do is come up to the cache and clear. So I was running into that problem earlier, but clearing the cache like clears like the stored information in local memory, so that you can get. Sometimes it gets a little sticky. So anyways, so here we go. What I'm going to do is to pull that information out. What I'm going to do is run a shuffle node. So I'm just going to bring in a shuffle node. And in here, essentially what it does is it pulls out my channels and separates that into a separate image. So here's that channel, and then this is what it's plugging into, a color image. So if I plug this here, you can see I'm looking at RGBA, right? Like my just color information. And I go ahead and view that, right? It's just viewing my color information and plugging the color information into the output for my beauty layer. So if I went ahead and chose that just glow, right, you can see the red, green, and blue color information from that just glow channel is now being output in RGBA. So now, this shuffle node right here has that just glow. And so I can make several shuffle nodes. So let's do shuffle and shuffle, right? Oh, if you have a node selected and you type in a new node, they automatically connect. So I'm just going to disconnect them. So I'm just going to connect multiple shuffle nodes here. And you can name these too, right? And so if I go ahead and take these, and this one I'm going to do the just glow, this one I'm going to do no glow, and this one I'm going to do emissive or thick portal. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is you can see if I look at, I'm pressing 1 when I'm looking or selecting the node, which is just going to automatically connect it to the viewer. So you can see these are the 3 separations here. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a merge node. So a merge node is just the way that you add things together like you would in Photoshop or with a layer system, right? In Substance Painter, right? Merge is just going to add layers together. So if I'm going to press 1 on the merge node, and if I add these 2 together, you can see I'm getting both the scene without the glow, so this one, and just the glow, and so it's adding them back together. And you can see it's essentially this image without the emissive object, right? And then if I just add the emissive object in as well, oops, keep doing that. If I add that one in, now I have all 3 of them added back together. So it looks just like my beauty pass, right? And so you might ask, well, what was the point of that? The reason is I can come in here and I can do different corrections, right? So I can come in here and I can do like a grade node. So grade node's kind of like a value adjustment node, a lot like the remap node or levels node. And so I can, boost the brightness of that light, or if I need to pull it back a little bit, I can do that. Okay, so I have all of my render passes separated out, and so when I combine it and then combine back together, and so by doing this, right, I have these should look essentially just like my my original beauty pass, right? Because they're just all the 3 main components of my render in this case, and I'm just recombining them back together. But this gives me flexibility, right? So I can, these grade nodes are just like basic color or value correction nodes, so I can change and boost things. Let's go here, right? So I can change and boost those different passes, right? Double click on that, right? So I can make value adjustments. Let's not do that on the beauty pass though. Let's just work with our default lighting, okay? But then on my emissive objects, I can, kind of play around with that and get that to have a certain look. Okay, so that's really nice. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I am going to, let's just make sure I didn't mess it. Okay, yeah, let's take this one and I'm going to set this button back down to 1. And this one, I'll boost that light bleeding off of it a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and show you guys how to do a glow. So let's go ahead and add a glow node. So I'm just going to press tab, type in glow. All right, and you see I added it to the end of my chain, and that's not great, but we'll see what this looks like. We'll go over the settings first. So what it's doing is taking all my information, and it's looking at the different pixel values, and then depending on the pixel values, it's going to brighten and then blur that pixel value. So it's essentially adding on, if you click on this button right here, effect only, it can show you kind of what's being added on the image. So it's adding this onto the image. So it's taking this and adding this to it, and which is going to brighten it, and then it gives it this kind of fuzzy look, right? So that's what glow is essentially doing, is like taking a version of your image and then it's blurring it and adding it back onto the original image to brighten it. So it gives this kind of this like hazy kind of effect, which is, we're going to be using it for like light sources or really bright values in the image to make it feel like a camera lens, that kind of like imperfection of a camera lens and that light source kind of, giving you that blurring effect or that blooming effect. So what I'm going to do is I don't want to well, okay, let's go over the settings. So we have tint. So tint is just going to be, you can do like change the color, right? So you can click on that little color wheel and you can change it to have like a certain tint or color to it. I'm not going to mess around with that one. And we'll just click that again to make it go back to the sliders. We have our tolerance. Tolerance is going to be, it's going to discern, right now it's just taking all the pixels and doing it, but if I bring it up, you can see it's only grabbing the bright pixels, right? So that's like a good way of controlling what the bloom is doing, or that glow is doing. But in this case, if I had a reflective metal object, that would also look like it's glowing, quote unquote, right? Because that might still have really bright values. So I can't really just use just this tolerance. I'm going to do something else in a second. Brightness is, how bright that image is. And if we look at the effect only, right, you can see that brightness, and here we can see the tolerance, right? It's just choosing different values, right? And then saturation is just going to dial back the saturation of the image, right? It just makes it less punchy, especially if it might like make your glow or your portal feel like a little too punchy and saturated. So you can just use that saturation, pull it back. Size is going to be the size of the blurring, right? You can see it does more blurring and less blurring. And then mix would be just, kind of is essentially any node that has mix on it just means essentially opacity. Okay. So let's turn off effect only so we can see that that's what it looks like. So that looks like hot garbage right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete that node. And what I'm going to do is I want to be more discerning. I just want to only grab the portal and glow the portal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in glow, drop in a new glow node. I'm going to plug it into my emissive chain. So we have this emissive map. I also added a grade node just so I can, if I need to make adjustments later, and then I'm just going to attach the glow node. And just for safety, my main beauty layer without the glow stuff, I'm going to delete that grade node because I do not want to mess with my lighting in my scene in this case. We're going to take this node right here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to add it back to this image. So we're going to come over here, we're going to add another merge node. So I'll add a merge node, I'll connect the B input to here. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. And for the A input, we're going to grab this node, glow node. So you can see it's just taking my original image and it's adding this right here back onto it. So obviously that's not great because it looks like it's exploding. And so what we're going to do first is we're going to come in here and we're going to make it so it's only grabbing the effect. Because by default, it takes the original image and the glow added together. So if I do only effect, it's only going to do the glowing part, and it's not going to take our original image and output it out. So if I do that, then you can see I'm pressing D to disable my node. Right? You see that's a little bit better than when it wasn't effect only, right? But we're going to go ahead and play with this. So we're going to set the tolerance a little bit higher, right? So it's grabbing like the brighter pixels to do that. We can dial back the brightness a little bit. We could do that through the brightness, but we could also do that on this merge node, just doing mix to kind of dial down the effect if we want to. I'm going to leave that alone for now. And then I'm going to go ahead and change the size. So we can just bring that size up. And so I'm going to bring that saturation down just a bit. So let's just bring it down to about here. We'll bring that brightness down, just get that. We'll put the saturation back up a little bit. And then we'll just make that glow effect a little larger. So a lot of times when I'm doing this, I like to do this in multiple steps, right? You don't want this to be like overriding your surfacing information. So like you don't want your whole image to be just blurry, glowy, right? Because that's a really quick way to make your project look bad when you're trying to make it look cooler or plus it. So just keep that in mind. Like be careful of doing too many of this stuff. But I can do this again, right? I can add another merge node at the bottom of my chain, and I could add another glow node. So glow. And I think if I do control, so what I can do is grab this right here, and you can hold control. You see these little guys right here. If I click on that, it adds this little kind of like break node. So it doesn't do anything. It just lets you like redirect the lines so they're easier to look at. So if I do that right there, I can add that there, and then I can go over here. So this one's going to come over from here. And so you can see that obviously that's also, again, going to be too much. So on this new glow, I'm going to double click that layer to bring it up to the top. We're going to do effect only. I'm going to increase the tolerance, and we're going to bring the brightness down a bit. And actually, let's bring the brightness up a little bit, and we're going to make the size a lot tighter. Essentially, because I'm adding these glow nodes on, it's glowing a lot. What I could do, and let's go ahead and we're going to plug these straight into the emissive map. And I'm going to make this, so we're going to go and pull that there. So we have the emissive going into the first glow. Let's delete that. It's going to the second glow, and it's also going into this top top layer stack. I'm going to put this grade between this merge and the emissive, and then I can maybe just bring the gain down or the gamma down, right? So that's just going to darken it a little bit. So let's just do gain, right? Gain's probably good. So that way, after I add on all of those, right? Let's do gain, right? So if I bring that down, you can see it's not what I want, but you know, I'm going to bring that down and to counteract a little bit of these glow nodes. And then these glow nodes, I can go ahead and just kind of dial back the mix a bit. So we'll come back here, I dial back the mix a bit, and then come back up here to here, and then we'll just go ahead and bring that gain back down a little bit just to dial it back. So anyways, so now I have those, yeah, okay. Let's go ahead and grab this node, this node, this node. I'm just going to show you guys, right? So I'm just kind of adding that bloom effect. So it's just supposed to add like a little bit more believability to your image. Hope this helps. I know it was pretty complicated, and there's a lot of different new nodes and a new tool using Nuke here, but it can be really powerful and give you a lot of control. You know, I'm doing this on a single image. Once I've done my batch render, what I would do is I would replace this with that single frame export with my image sequence, right? There's sequences, you can click on that, you'd find it on the render farm or wherever the output of the render farm is. You grab all those images and it'll load them in, and so it'll load them in as a sequence. You can watch it for your turntable and play it back. And then what you could do is you would do a write node. So we do a write node, and you'd plug that in, and then you'd output that out as image sequence. Or like if you want to go ahead and bring it into After Effects or Premiere or something like that, you would do an image sequence. And again, I don't, mostly because I know every time I mess with this write node, I have to like refigure it out again. I don't want to go over that all, but there's plenty of tutorials out there, but you'll render it out again from Nuke and it breaks it down. Or if you want it to be like a video file out of Nuke, then you could export it as a video file. Cool, so I hope this helps.